The manila envelope on my kitchen table might as well have been a death certificate. Inside were divorce papers, custody arrangements, and photographs that would destroy everything I thought I controlled. How does one night of poor judgment turn a marriage into a legal battlefield? How does the husband everyone pities become the one holding all the cards? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Lysandra Quill, and I used to think I was smart enough to have it all. Sunday night felt different when I walked through our front door. The house smelled like Daniel's cooking, something with garlic and herbs that usually made me feel welcomed home. Tonight, it felt like evidence of how little I appreciated what I had. "Hey, you're back," Daniel called from the kitchen, not looking up from washing dishes. His voice carried that flat tone I'd been hearing more often lately. "How was the conference?" I dropped my suitcase by the stairs, trying to shake off the guilt that had been gnawing at me during the entire 3-hour drive home. Exhausting. You know how these corporate retreats are. Endless meetings, terrible hotel coffee, forced networking until midnight. Midnight? Daniel finally turned around, dish towel in his hands. His brown eyes, usually warm and trusting, seemed to be studying my face. "That's pretty late for a work event." Something in his tone made my stomach clench. "Well, you know Marcus. He thinks team bonding happens over drinks in the hotel bar. I couldn't exactly leave early. He's my boss." Daniel nodded slowly, but I caught him glancing at my suitcase. "Ruby missed you. She kept asking when you'd be home. I told her Sunday night, but she waited up until 9. The guilt twisted deeper. Our 8-year-old daughter had probably wanted to tell me about her weekend, maybe show me a drawing or share some playground drama. Instead, I'd been nursing a hangover and trying to figure out how to act normal around my husband. "I'll make it up to her tomorrow," I said, heading toward the stairs. "Maybe I'll take her for ice cream after school." "She has soccer practice tomorrow." I paused, my hand on the banister. Of course she did. Daniel managed Ruby's schedule with the precision of a military operation, while I floated through our family life like a part-time participant. "Right. Tuesday then." I hauled my suitcase upstairs, hyper-aware of every sound Daniel was making in the kitchen. The careful way he set dishes in the drying rack, the deliberate footsteps as he moved around. Even his silence felt loaded with suspicion. In our bedroom, I started unpacking with shaky hands. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I nearly dropped it in my haste to check. "Marcus, no one can know about Friday." My blood went cold. I quickly deleted the message, but as I looked up, Daniel was standing in the doorway. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just work stuff," I said, shoving my phone into my purse. "Marcus is paranoid about client confidentiality." Daniel's eyes lingered on my purse for a moment too long. Must have been some important business discussions. You know how it is in HR. Everything's sensitive. I turned back to my suitcase, pulling out wrinkled blouses and trying to look casual. "How was your weekend? Did you and Ruby do anything fun?" "We went to the park, built a fort in the backyard. She helped me make pancakes this morning." His voice softened when he talked about Ruby, the way it always did. "She asked why you couldn't come to the conference with us instead of going to your work thing." Each word felt like a small knife. "Did you explain that Mommy has to work sometimes?" I did, but she said her friend Emma's mom works too, and she still comes to Emma's soccer games. I slammed my suitcase shut harder than necessary. "Well, Emma's mom probably doesn't have the kind of responsibilities I have. Some of us can't just coast through part-time jobs." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel stood there for a long moment, and I could feel his disappointment radiating across the room. "I'm going to check on Ruby," he said finally. "Make sure she's actually asleep and not reading under her covers." After he left, I sat on our bed and stared at my hands. They were shaking slightly, and I could still smell Marcus's cologne on my blazer. Friday night was supposed to be a mistake, a moment of weakness after too many drinks, and too many complaints about how Daniel never really saw me anymore. But sitting in our bedroom, surrounded by family photos, and Daniel's reading glasses on the nightstand, it felt like something much worse than a mistake. It felt like a betrayal that was going to eat me alive. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my sister Petra. Petra, how did it go? Did you tell Daniel you need more support at home? I stared at the message, remembering our conversation before I left. Petra had been encouraging me to assert myself more, to demand that Daniel pay more attention to my needs. She'd been divorced twice and seemed to think every marriage problem could be solved by the wife getting tougher. Me. We'll talk tomorrow, long weekend. Petra, don't let him make you feel guilty for having a life outside the house. You deserve to be appreciated. If only she knew how appreciated I'd felt Friday night, pressed against Marcus in the hotel elevator, his hands tangling in my hair as he whispered how beautiful I was. How alive I'd felt for the first time in months, and how dead I felt now. Daniel's voice drifted down the hallway as he read Ruby a bedtime story, something about a brave little mouse who saved her family from danger. His voice was patient and warm, full of the love I'd been taking for granted while I convinced myself I was neglected. When he finally came back to our room, I was already under the covers, pretending to be asleep. He moved quietly around the room, brushing his teeth and changing into pajamas, with the considerate silence of someone who thought his wife was exhausted from a work trip. He slipped into bed beside me, and for a moment I thought he might reach for me the way he used to. Instead, he settled on his side of the bed and whispered, "Good night, Lise." I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing even out, and wondered how I was going to live with what I'd done. Monday morning at the office felt like walking into a minefield. I'd been dreading this moment since I woke up Saturday morning in Marcus's hotel bed, my head pounding, and my wedding ring sitting on his nightstand like an accusation. The HR department occupied the third floor of our downtown building, a maze of cubicles and conference rooms where workplace drama usually stayed contained. Today, I could feel eyes following me as I made my way to my desk. Well, look who's back from the executive retreat," said Jennifer Walsh, my cubicle neighbor, with a smirk that made my stomach drop. "How was the 5-star treatment?" "It was a working conference, not a vacation," I replied, settling into my chair and powering up my computer. Mostly boring presentations about compliance updates. Jennifer leaned against my cubicle wall, clearly settling in for gossip. "Funny thing though, my cousin works at the Marriott downtown. She mentioned seeing some interesting elevator security footage from Friday night." My blood turned to ice, but I forced myself to keep typing. "Security footage of what?" "Oh, you know how these hotel people talk. Something about executives getting very collaborative after the bar closed." I looked up sharply. "Jennifer, if you have something to say, just say it." She held up her hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm not judging. We all know how stressful these corporate events can be. Sometimes you need to blow off steam with colleagues who understand the pressure." Before I could respond, Marcus's voice cut across the office. "Lysandra, could I see you in my office?" Every head in the vicinity turned to watch me walk across the floor to his corner office. I could feel the weight of their speculation, and I knew Jennifer would be taking notes on how long I was in there. Marcus closed the door behind me, and suddenly we were alone for the first time since I'd snuck out of his hotel room at dawn on Saturday. He looked impeccable as always. Pressed shirt, perfect tie, not a hair out of place. You'd never guess he'd spent Friday night tangled in hotel sheets with his subordinate. "We need to establish some boundaries," he said without preamble, not even looking at me as he shuffled papers on his desk. "What happened Friday was a lapse in judgment. It can't happen again." I stared at him, this man who'd whispered sweet things in my ear just 3 nights ago, who'd made me feel desired and important. Now he was treating me like a problem to be managed. "Marcus, I know it was complicated, but there's no but, Lysandra." He finally looked up, and his expression was coldly professional. "I'm married. You're married. We both have reputations and careers to protect. Friday night was a mistake that ends now. So that's it. We just pretend nothing happened. That's exactly what we do. He picked up a file folder and handed it to me. Here's the Morrison account. I need a full compliance review by Thursday. I took the folder, my hands trembling slightly. What about what you said, about how you felt? Marcus's jaw tightened. What I said was influenced by alcohol and poor judgment. I suggest you remember that if anyone asks questions. The dismissal was clear. I walked back to my cubicle feeling like I'd been slapped, hyper-aware of the curious stares from my colleagues. Jennifer was practically vibrating with curiosity. "Everything okay?" she asked as I slumped into my chair. "You look a little pale." "Just tired," I muttered, opening the Morrison file without really seeing it. The morning dragged on with a series of small humiliations. In the break room, conversation stopped when I entered. During the staff meeting, I caught people exchanging glances when Marcus addressed me with formal politeness. By lunch, I was ready to scream. I called Petra from my car, needing someone who would understand. "You sound stressed," she said immediately. "Is Daniel giving you grief about the work trip?" "It's not Daniel, it's just office politics. You know how it is." "Oh, honey, don't let them intimidate you. You work twice as hard as any of those people. If they're jealous of your relationship with your boss, that's their problem." If only she knew how complicated that relationship had become. "Petra, can I ask you something? Hypothetically, if someone made a mistake, a big one, how do they fix it?" "What kind of mistake?" I stared out my windshield at the parking garage wall. "The kind that could hurt people you care about." "Well, that depends. Sometimes the best thing is to come clean and deal with the consequences. But sometimes, if it was truly a one-time thing and telling would just cause unnecessary pain..." She paused. "Liz, what's going on? This isn't really hypothetical, is it?" "I have to go," I said quickly. "I'll call you later." The afternoon was worse than the morning. Marcus avoided me completely, delegating through email instead of face-to-face conversations. When I tried to catch his eye during a department meeting, he looked right through me. At 4 o'clock, I found something in my mailbox that made my knees weak. It was a printed photograph, grainy clearly from security camera footage, showing Marcus and me in the hotel elevator. His hand was on my waist, and I was looking up at him with an expression that could only be described as adoring. There was no note, no signature. Just the photo, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. on Friday night. I crumpled it up and shoved it in my purse, my heart hammering. Someone knew, someone had access to hotel security footage and was playing games with me. The rest of the day passed in a blur of paranoia. Every phone call could be someone who'd seen the photo. Every email might contain another piece of evidence. By 5:30, I was exhausted from the constant anxiety. As I packed up my desk, Jennifer appeared again. "Rough day?" "Just busy," I said, not trusting my voice to stay steady. "You know, Lise, if you ever need someone to talk to, we all go through rough patches. Marriage stuff, work stress, feeling unappreciated." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Sometimes we make choices we wouldn't normally make." I looked up sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing specific, just that you seem like you're carrying a heavy load lately. Daniel's a good guy, but he's pretty focused on his work, isn't he? Might not notice if his wife needed a little extra attention." The implication was clear. Jennifer knew something, or at least suspected it. How many other people were putting pieces together? I drove home in a fog of dread, checking my rearview mirror obsessively as if I were being followed. The photo was burning a hole in my purse, and I couldn't stop wondering who had sent it and what they wanted. When I pulled into our driveway, Daniel's car was already there. Through the kitchen window, I could see him helping Ruby with homework at the dining room table. They were laughing about something, and the sight of their easy happiness made my chest ache. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering courage to go inside and pretend everything was normal. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Interesting conference photos. Wonder what your husband would think. My hand started shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Someone was threatening me. Someone had evidence of my affair and was planning to use it. I deleted the message and walked into my house, where my husband was making dinner and my daughter was practicing spelling words, and tried to figure out how I was going to protect the life I'd been so carelessly willing to throw away. Saturday morning at Miller's Diner was supposed to be routine family time, the kind of wholesome tradition that made us look like we had our lives together. Daniel, Ruby, and I sitting in our usual booth, sharing pancakes and planning the weekend. Today, it felt like performing in a play where I'd forgotten all my lines. "Can I get chocolate chip pancakes?" Ruby asked, bouncing in her seat as she studied the menu she'd memorized months ago. "Of course, sweetheart," Daniel said, ruffling her hair. "What about you, Liz? The usual?" I nodded absently, scanning the restaurant. Half our neighborhood seemed to be here, including Daniel's mother, Elaine, who was sitting 2 booths away with her book club friends. She caught my eye and gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll be right back," I said, sliding out of the booth. "Just going to say hi to your mum." Elaine Quill had never been my biggest fan, but she'd always been polite for Daniel's sake. Today, her greeting felt distinctly chilly. "Lysandra, dear, how was your work conference?" "Educational," I said, forcing a smile. "Lots of new policies to implement." "I'm sure." Elaine's book club friends, 3 women I'd known peripherally for years, were watching our exchange with obvious interest. "Daniel mentioned you were gone until quite late Friday night." Something in her tone made me defensive. "Work events run long sometimes. You know how it is in corporate environments." "Actually, I don't," said Margaret Hoffman, one of Elaine's friends. "I was a teacher for 30 years, and our conferences always ended by 9, even the social mixers." I felt heat rising in my cheeks. "Well, HR is different. We have to network with executives from other companies. It's part of building professional relationships." "Professional relationships," Elaine repeated slowly. "How important those must be." Before I could respond, my sister Petra appeared at my elbow. She'd agreed to meet us for brunch, and her timing couldn't have been worse, or better, depending on how you looked at it. "There you are," Petra said, giving me a hug that felt like armor. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was insane." She nodded politely to Elaine and her friends. "Ladies." "Petra," Elaine acknowledged coolly. "How nice to see you." The tension was thick enough to cut. Petra had never hidden her opinion that Daniel was too passive and that I deserved a husband who fought for me more. Elaine, in turn, thought Petra was a bad influence who encouraged me to be selfish. "We should get back to our table," I said quickly. "Ruby's waiting for us to order." As we walked away, I heard Margaret whisper something to Elaine that made the older woman's face tighten with disapproval. "What was that about?" Petra asked as we slid into the booth across from Daniel and Ruby. "Nothing," I said. "Just small talk." But Daniel was watching me with that same studying expression I'd been seeing all week. My mom seemed upset about something. "You know how she gets," I said, deflecting. "She probably read some article about corporate culture corrupting family values." Petra snorted. "Elaine needs to join the 21st century. Women are allowed to have careers now." "It's not about having a career," Daniel said quietly. "It's about balance." "Balance?" Petra's voice sharpened. "Like how you work 60-hour weeks and expect Lise to handle everything at home?" I wanted to kick her under the table. This was exactly the wrong conversation to be having in public, especially with Daniel already suspicious about something. "I don't expect Lysandra to handle everything," Daniel said, his voice still calm, but with an edge I recognized. "We share responsibilities." "Really? When's the last time you planned a family vacation? Or remembered Ruby's teacher conference? Or noticed when your wife needed support instead of criticism?" Ruby looked up from her coloring book, sensing the adult tension. "Are you guys fighting?" "No, sweetheart," I said quickly. Aunt Petra and Daddy are just having a discussion. But Petra was on a roll now, fueled by her own bitter experiences with marriage. Liz works just as hard as you do, Daniel, but she also manages the household, coordinates Ruby's activities, and tries to advance her career. Maybe if you paid more attention to what she actually needs, she wouldn't have to find appreciation elsewhere. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Daniel went very still, and I felt the blood drain from my face. "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. "Find appreciation elsewhere?" "I just meant—" Petra started, but I cut her off. "She meant at work," I said desperately. "Finding professional appreciation, recognition for my contributions." "Right," Petra said, but she was looking at me strangely. "Professional appreciation." The waitress appeared to take our order, giving me a moment to breathe. But I could feel Daniel processing Petra's words, and I knew his analytical mind was filing away every suspicious detail. After we ordered, I tried to steer the conversation to safer ground. "So, Ruby, tell Aunt Petra about your art project." As Ruby launched into an enthusiastic description of her papier-mâché volcano, I caught Elaine watching us from across the restaurant. Her expression was troubled, and I wondered how much of our conversation she'd overheard. "You know," I said, raising my voice slightly, "it's funny how some people think they know what goes on in other people's marriages, like they're experts on relationships they're not even part of." It was a petty jab at Elaine, but I was feeling cornered and defensive. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mum's just concerned," he said. "She cares about our family." "Your mum thinks I'm not good enough for you," I shot back. "She always has." "That's not true." "Isn't it? She's never missed an opportunity to point out my flaws. How I work too much, how I'm not domestic enough, how I don't appreciate what I have." Petra jumped in to support me. "Elaine's from a different generation. She doesn't understand modern marriages where both partners have ambitions." "Some ambitions are more important than others," Daniel said quietly. The comment stung because I knew what he meant. My ambition had led me to Marcus's hotel room, to compromises I never thought I'd make. But instead of feeling ashamed, I felt angry at being judged. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "My career matters too, Daniel. My professional relationships matter. If you can't understand that, maybe the problem isn't with me." Ruby had stopped coloring and was looking between us with worried eyes. "Mummy, are you mad at Daddy?" "No, baby," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Mommy and Daddy just disagree sometimes. That's normal." But nothing about this felt normal. I could see people at nearby tables glancing our way, drawn by the tension in our voices. Elaine was openly staring now, her book club friends whispering behind their menus. When our food arrived, we ate in strained silence. Ruby chatted about school and friends, filling the awkward gaps between adult conversation. Daniel answered her questions and helped her cut her pancakes, but I could feel him withdrawing emotionally. As we prepared to leave, Elaine appeared at our table. "Ruby, sweetheart, would you like to come spend the afternoon with Grandma? We could bake cookies and work on that puzzle we started." Ruby's face lit up. "Can I, Daddy?" Daniel looked at me, and I nodded. Maybe some time apart would help us both cool down. "That would be great, Mom. Thanks." As Ruby gathered her things, Elaine leaned down to whisper something in Daniel's ear. I couldn't hear the words, but his expression darkened. "What did she say?" I asked as we walked to our cars. "Nothing important," Daniel replied, but his tone suggested otherwise. That evening, after Ruby came home full of stories about baking and games with Grandma, Daniel disappeared into his home office. I could hear him typing on his computer, the rapid-fire clicking of keys that meant he was working on something intensive. I knocked on the door around 10 o'clock. "Coming to bed?" "In a while," he said without looking up from his screen. "Just finishing something." I tried to see what he was working on, but he minimized the window before I could get a good look. "Work project?" "Something like that." The distance between us felt like a chasm now. I wanted to bridge it, to find some way back to the easy companionship we'd once shared. But every time I opened my mouth, I was afraid of what might come out. "Daniel, about today." "Let's not," he said firmly. "I'm tired," and we both said things we probably didn't mean. But as I lay in bed alone, waiting for him to join me, I had the sinking feeling that we'd both said exactly what we meant, and that the consequences were going to be worse than I could imagine. The sound of Daniel changing the password on our shared savings account was a soft chime from my phone at 2:17 a.m. on Tuesday morning. I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling and replaying every mistake I'd made in the past week, when the bank notification lit up my screen. Account access has been modified by primary account holder. My stomach dropped. Daniel was the primary on our savings account. A technicality from when we'd first opened it years ago that had never seemed important until now. I tried logging into the app, but my password no longer worked. I looked over at Daniel's side of the bed. He was sleeping peacefully, or at least pretending to be. In the dim light from my phone, his face looked younger, more like the man I'd married 9 years ago, before I'd started taking him for granted, before I'd convinced myself I deserved better than his quiet, steady love. Wednesday passed in a haze of anxiety. At work, Marcus continued to treat me like a stranger, while Jennifer and the other office vultures circled with barely concealed glee. I'd received 2 more anonymous texts with vague threats about interesting photos, and every time my phone buzzed, my heart rate spiked. By Thursday evening, I couldn't take the tension anymore. Daniel had been polite but distant all week, going through the motions of family life while clearly planning something I couldn't see. After Ruby went to bed, I found him in the kitchen, methodically loading the dishwasher. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't look up from the dishes. "About what?" "About whatever's been going on with you this week. The password change, the cold shoulder, the way you've been watching me like I'm some kind of criminal." Daniel straightened up slowly, dish towel in his hands. When he finally looked at me, his expression was calmer than I'd expected. "Okay, let's talk." We sat across from each other at the dining room table, the same spot where we'd had countless conversations about Ruby's school, vacation plans, household repairs. Tonight it felt like a courtroom. "I know something happened on your work trip," Daniel said without preamble. "I don't know exactly what, but I know you're lying about it." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm not lying about anything. I told you it was a corporate conference, boring meetings and forced networking. Until midnight. Sometimes later. I explained this already." Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "The thing is, Liz, I have a pretty good memory for details. You told me Sunday night that you got back to your hotel around midnight after networking drinks." "That's right." He swiped to something on his phone and turned it toward me. It was a video, grainy dashboard camera footage of our driveway. The timestamp showed 2:03 a.m. on Saturday morning, and there I was, getting out of my car and walking to our front door. "But you didn't get home until after 2, Daniel continued, his voice still eerily calm. "Which means either you're lying about when the work event ended, or you're lying about what you did afterward." I stared at the video, my mind racing for an explanation that wouldn't destroy everything. There was an accident on the highway. Traffic was backed up for hours. I didn't want to wake you, so I didn't call." "An accident?" Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That's interesting, because I checked the traffic reports for Friday night. No accidents on your route home. No construction delays. The walls were closing in. Maybe I took a different route. Maybe I stopped for gas or coffee. At 2 in the morning, in a town where everything closes by 11. I could feel sweat beading on my forehead. "Daniel, I don't understand why you're interrogating me like this. So I got home later than I remembered." "So what? I was tired and stressed and not paying attention to the time." He set his phone down and leaned back in his chair. "Where's your gold earring? The one from the set I gave you for our anniversary?" The question caught me completely off guard. "What?" Your gold earrings. You were wearing them when you left for the conference. I noticed because you always wear them to important work events, but you only came home with one. My hand instinctively went to my ear. I'd lost one of the earrings in Marcus's hotel room and had been hoping Daniel wouldn't notice. They were distinctive, small gold knots that he'd saved up to buy me during our first year of marriage. I must have lost it somewhere. Hotels are notorious for that kind of thing. Lost it where exactly? I don't know, Daniel. Maybe in the bathroom, or it fell out in the conference room. Why does it matter? It matters because you're lying to me. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. You've been lying to me all week, and I want to know why. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. I can't believe you're doing this, tracking my movements, questioning every detail like I'm some kind of suspect. This is paranoid behavior, Daniel. It's not healthy. You're right, he said. It's not healthy. You know what else isn't healthy? A wife who comes home from a work trip acting guilty and defensive. A wife who can't keep her story straight about where she was and when. I spun around to face him. Maybe your wife is acting defensive because her husband is treating her like a criminal instead of trusting her. Trust has to be earned, Lysandra, and lately you haven't been earning it. The use of my full name was like a slap. Daniel only called me Lysandra when he was truly angry, and it had been years since I'd heard that tone. What is that supposed to mean? It means I've been watching you pull away from this family for months. Working late, going out with colleagues, complaining about how unappreciated you are. It means I've noticed how you light up when you talk about your boss, but barely look at me when I come home. My chest tightened. That's not fair. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked about my day? When's the last time you seemed happy to see me walk through that door? I wanted to argue, but the word stuck in my throat, because he was right and we both knew it. Marriage is hard work, Daniel. Sometimes people go through rough patches. That doesn't mean what? That you get to check out emotionally? That you get to find what you're missing somewhere else? The accusation hung between us like a live wire. I could deny it, keep lying, keep trying to gaslight him into believing his suspicions were unfounded. Or I could tell the truth and watch our marriage implode in real time. I don't know what you think happened, I said carefully, but you're wrong. Daniel studied my face for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket again and pulled out something that made my knees go weak. It was my missing earring. I found this in your suitcase, he said quietly, wrapped in a hotel washcloth that you apparently forgot to unpack. The room started spinning. The earring had been tangled in my hair when I'd rushed to get dressed in Marcus's room. I'd grabbed it along with the washcloth I'd used to clean up, shoving both into my suitcase in my panicked hurry to get out of there. That doesn't prove anything, I whispered. Doesn't it? You told me you lost it at the hotel. But here it is, wrapped in a hotel washcloth, hidden in your luggage. What am I supposed to think, Lise? I sank back into my chair, the fight going out of me. I can explain. I'm listening. But how could I explain without admitting everything? How could I tell him that I'd been feeling neglected and unappreciated, that Marcus had made me feel special and desired, that one drink had led to another, until I'd found myself in his bed, hating myself even as I betrayed everything I claimed to value? It's complicated, I said finally. Uncomplicate it. From upstairs came the sound of Ruby's bedroom door opening, followed by small feet padding toward the bathroom. We both froze, listening to the mundane sounds of our daughter's nighttime routine. The toilet flushing, water running, the soft click of her door closing again. She can't know about this, I said desperately. Whatever you think happened, Ruby can't be hurt by it. Ruby's already being hurt by it, Daniel said. She's 8 years old, but she's not blind. She can feel the tension between us. She asked me yesterday if we were getting divorced like her friend Chloe's parents. The words hit me like a physical blow. What did you tell her? I told her that sometimes mummies and daddies go through difficult times, but that we both love her very much no matter what happens. No matter what happens, I repeated. What's that supposed to mean? Daniel stood up, suddenly looking exhausted. It means I can't keep pretending everything is normal when it's not. It means I can't keep making excuses for behavior that's tearing our family apart. Daniel, please, if you'll just let me explain. Explain what? How you ended up with hotel washcloths in your suitcase? How you lost track of 2 hours on Friday night? How you've been getting mysterious text messages that make you look like you've seen a ghost? I stared at him. You've been watching my phone. I've been watching my wife act like a stranger in her own home. And now I know why. He walked toward the stairs, then paused. I've made an appointment with a lawyer for tomorrow afternoon. I think it's time we both started being honest about what we want from this marriage. As his footsteps disappeared up the stairs, I sat alone at our dining room table, surrounded by the wreckage of 9 years of marriage and wondering how I'd managed to destroy everything I claimed to love in the span of one weekend. Friday morning brought the manila envelope that changed everything. I'd spent the night on the living room couch, staring at the ceiling, and trying to figure out how to salvage my marriage. Daniel had left early for his lawyer appointment, kissing Ruby goodbye with forced cheerfulness while avoiding my eyes entirely. The envelope was sitting on our kitchen table when I came downstairs to make coffee, as if it had materialized overnight. My name was written across the front in Daniel's careful handwriting. Inside were photocopies of documents I didn't even know existed. Bank statements showing Daniel had moved money into a separate account. A consultation agreement with Morrison & Associates, the most respected family law firm in our city. And most damaging of all, a printed email thread between Daniel and a private investigator named Robert Chen. My hand shook as I read through their correspondence. Daniel had hired Chen 3 days ago to look into my recent behavioral changes and suspicious activities. The investigator had been thorough and efficient. There were photos from the hotel security system showing Marcus and me in the elevator, in the lobby bar, walking toward his room. Credit card receipts proving I'd lied about the timeline of events. Phone records showing text messages between Marcus and me that I thought I'd deleted. But the most devastating evidence was a witness statement from the hotel cleaning staff. A housekeeper named Maria Santos had seen me leaving Marcus's room at 6:23 a.m. on Saturday morning, wearing the same clothes I'd had on the night before. I sank into a kitchen chair, the papers scattered around me like the remains of my old life. Daniel hadn't just suspected my affair, he'd systematically documented it with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. My phone buzzed with a call from work. I almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed it was my direct supervisor, Helen Martinez. Lysandra, I need you to come in immediately, Helen said without preamble. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. What kind of situation? The kind we need to discuss in person. How quickly can you get here? 30 minutes later, I was sitting in Helen's office while she reviewed a file that seemed to contain my entire life. Helen was a stern woman in her 50s who'd worked her way up from entry-level positions and had zero tolerance for workplace drama. I'm going to be direct, Helen said, closing the file. We've received a formal complaint about inappropriate conduct between you and Marcus Vane. The complaint includes photographic evidence and witness statements. My mouth went dry. Who filed the complaint? That's confidential. What matters is that we have to investigate these allegations thoroughly. As of today, you're suspended with pay pending the outcome of our review. Helen, I can explain. I strongly advise you not to explain anything without legal representation present. This investigation could result in termination and could affect your ability to find employment elsewhere in the industry. I walked out of the building in a daze, my career in ruins along with my marriage. In the parking garage, I called Petra, desperate for someone who would understand. They can't fire you for having a personal life, Petra said after I'd explained the situation. This sounds like a witch hunt. It's not a witch hunt when you actually did what they're accusing you of, I said miserably. There was a long pause. Liz, what exactly did you do? I told her everything. The drinks with Marcus, the elevator ride, waking up in his bed, the lies I'd told Daniel, the evidence he'd collected, the lawyer meeting that was probably happening right now. Oh, honey, Petra said softly, why didn't you tell me? Because I knew it was wrong. Because I knew it would destroy everything. And I did it anyway. People make mistakes. Daniel's not perfect either. Maybe this will be a wake-up call for him to pay more attention to what you need. But even as she said it, Petra's voice lacked conviction. We both knew this wasn't the kind of mistake you recovered from easily. I spent the afternoon driving aimlessly around town, too ashamed to go home and too anxious to sit still. At 3 o'clock, I realized I was supposed to pick Ruby up from school. I'd been so consumed with my own crisis that I'd nearly forgotten about my daughter. Ruby was waiting in the after-school care room when I arrived, one of only 3 children left. The staff member on duty gave me a look that suggested this wasn't the first time I'd been late recently. "Mommy!" Ruby ran to me with the uncomplicated joy of childhood. "Can we get ice cream? Emma's mom took her for ice cream after school yesterday." "Sure, baby," I said, grateful for any excuse to delay going home. "Let's go to Morrison's." Morrison's ice cream parlor was a local institution, the kind of place where half the town gathered on sunny afternoons. Today it was crowded with families, and I immediately regretted the choice. Too many people who knew us, too many opportunities for awkward conversations. Ruby ordered a double scoop of chocolate chip cookie dough and chatted happily about her day, while I picked at a small vanilla cone I didn't want. I was trying to focus on her stories about recess drama and art class when I heard my name being called. "Lysandra, is that you?" I turned to see Margaret Hoffman, one of Elaine's book club friends from the diner incident. She was with 2 other women I recognized from various school events and neighborhood gatherings. "Oh, hi, Margaret," I said, forcing a smile. "How are you?" "I'm well, dear. Though I have to say, there's been quite a bit of talk around town about you lately." Margaret's warning still rang in my ears when I pulled into the driveway and saw Daniel's truck. Ruby bolted inside, yelling, "Daddy's home early," while I followed like a woman walking to her own execution. He was at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by neat stacks of paper. A thick manila envelope sat sealed beside his coffee, the word evidence stamped on it in red. Ruby launched into a recap of her day. Daniel listened with half an ear, eyes on me the whole time. When she finally ran upstairs to find the cat, he spoke. "Helen Martinez called. You're on paid leave pending investigation. Sexual misconduct with a subordinate at the conference. Ring any bells?" My knees buckled. I gripped the counter. He slid the envelope toward me. "Open it." Inside, printed hotel folio with both our names, mine and Caleb's. Keycard logs showing the door opened at 11:17 p.m. and not again until 6:03 a.m. A grainy still from the hallway camera of Caleb kissing my neck, and a flash drive labeled Audio, Room 1218. I couldn't breathe. "I didn't need a private investigator," he said quietly. "You use the company Amex, the same card I pay off every month." "Daniel, save it." He tapped another folder. "This is the petition I'm filing tomorrow. Adultery, plus the workplace scandal. The judge here is Helen's brother-in-law. You do the math." Ruby's voice floated down the stairs. "Daddy, can we have pancakes for dinner?" He answered without looking away from me. "Sure, baby, give me 10 minutes. Then, softer to me. "I'm taking her tonight. My brother's already fixing up the guest room. You can have the house until the interim hearing, but I'd start looking for an apartment." Tears blurred everything. "You're taking Ruby?" "I'm protecting Ruby. There's a difference." He picked up a small duffel that was already packed, his, and walked to the foot of the stairs. "Addie." "Coming, sweetheart." He paused, looked back once. "The locks change tomorrow at noon. Anything you want to keep, get it out by then." He climbed the stairs. I heard Ruby's delighted squeal when he told her they were having a sleepover at Uncle Mark's. 10 minutes later, the front door closed behind them. Through the window, I watched him buckle her into the truck, kiss the top of her head, and drive away without a single glance at the house. I stood in the kitchen that suddenly smelled like nothing at all, holding the envelope that used to be my life. The pancakes never got made.